It's the new look that was shaped by Christian Dior. It is very clear where the inspiration came from. It is Jackie Kennedy. The A-line code is clearly Balenciaga. The great shape Barbie, of course, she's Jane Fonda. For the Barbie doll, Spencer took this pattern and made it smaller. Hi, my name is Liz. I'm a fashion and art historian and the founder of the fashion label Pelagona. And on this channel, I'm telling you the stories behind fashion trends. Summer 2023 has been very pink. Everything has been revolving around this doll. As you may know, I'm a Barbie collector myself, and of course I'm interested in fashion, so I saw the Barbie movie, probably so have you. This is not another movie review, but the movie inspired me to do something that I've been actually wanting to do for a very long time. When you look at Barbie, she's actually a protagonist in fashion history. So what I'm going to do today is we are traveling back in time. We are traveling to the late 1950s when Barbie was born, and then step by step I'm going to explain how fashion trends were reflected in the Barbie dolls. Before we dive into the details, it's also quite important to know some background of the Barbie design philosophy. First of all, the technical skills of the people working with the doll and also the quality of her wardrobe are very, very high. The first models were actually hand-sewn by the design team, and the design team always applies the view that Barbie was actually a real person. So she is this stylish career woman who has a purpose. One purpose is to go to the office, the other one is to meet her friends, to go to a picnic, and she reflects fashion trends. I would not call her always a trendsetter, but if something was on vogue, Barbie probably wore it, or for sure wore it. But it could not be a too grown-up version because the target group was small children playing with the doll, and it was also very important that they could dress and undress the doll very easily. So now let's travel back in time. Let's start with the 1950s. The doll was launched in 1959, and the head designer, Charlotte Johnson, gave her 22 outfits, of which I picked the suburban shopper Barbie. She was launched in 1959 and sold until 64. And when we look at this doll, we see a very tight top with thick straps and a bell-shaped skirt. And it's a beautiful combination of pale blue and white with the stripes and also some small flowers. Barbie wears a sun hat, a straw hat, and a matching straw bag. We clearly see on the one hand Hollywood, Grace Kelly, all of these elegant styles, but it's actually more than this. It's the new look that was shaped by Christian Dior. Dior founded his atelier in 1947 in Paris. He manifested Paris as a fashion metropolis. He also exported his designs to the US by opening another branch in 1949. And around the world, Europe, US, all the women loved this style. This was very different to the style before the war, where the dresses were shorter, the silhouettes were more androgynous. This one was more fitting to the voluptuous body, which also reflected the economic miracle. People started to slowly have money again, so they wanted to show off their wealth also by clothing. This is why we also have these more feminine shapes by Dior. So on the one hand, Barbie reflects this trend of the new look. At the same time, she also is clearly still influenced by this Hollywood glamour. And this is very important to notice because who is Barbie? Barbie is American, and she also reflects a certain social class. She is the daughter of an upper class family, a well-to-do family, and she has to participate in certain events, functions, and this wardrobe needs to reflect that style of this social class. Another interesting point is when we look at that doll, and a lot of these dolls from the first collection, and having in mind that they were sold until 64, they might look a bit backward looking. Some may even say a bit outdated, because in 64, fashion-wise, we were already in a completely different universe. But Barbie always oriented herself in the beginning until 1965 on this more 50s style, more established style. And where does this come from? It is this view of the upper class in America, which comes from the 19th century, that dressing according to current trends is too vulgar. It's better to have a tried and tested, elegant wardrobe. And this is exactly what Barbie stands for in these early years. Another example from these early collections is the Roman holiday Barbie, which I personally really like. She wears an ensemble with a coat in white and red stripes, and we immediately know by looking at the doll what she represents. She represents the movie with the same name with Audrey Hepburn. And it reflects the love affair of Americans with Europe, and particularly France and Italy in the 1950s. So when I think about Italy in the 1950s, of course, I also think about the Cinecittà, the local film industry. And the Italians were actually really crafty with it, because they imported all the stars like Audrey Hepburn, Elizabeth Taylor, Ava Gardner, showed Italy, created the myth about Italy, and also promoted Italian fashion with it. Because up until then, the Alta Moda was always a bit in the shadows of the French haute couture. And the Italians started to organize fashion shows and also show the craftsmanship and the quality of Italian garments. And with these movies and creating this longing for Italy, they started exporting their clothing also to America. Another example I'd like to discuss here from the early collection is the Gay Parisienne from 1959. It's quite a rare Barbie doll, and she's interesting on the one hand because she reflects this wish to travel to Europe, but also how designers influenced Barbie's wardrobe from the very beginning. She wears a blue dress, a dark blue dress with tiny polka dots and a balloon-shaped skirt with it. And this skirt hints at Hubert de Givenchy, who invented this type of silhouette. We had quite a few silhouettes in the 1950s. I already mentioned the A-line shape or the bell-shaped skirts, and this was one of them. Another example would be the Easter Parade Barbie, who clearly references the Paris-based designer Cristobal Balenciaga. And she wears a very cute combination. It's this dress with kind of an apple print and an A-line coat. And when we look at the coat and also the small details, we can immediately say it's Balenciaga. To close the circle of French influence of Barbie, of course, there was also Gabrielle Chanel. When we look at the commuter set Barbie, it's a clear Chanel suit in navy, and the design team gave Barbie two tops, one for daytime and one to change into for an evening event. And Gabrielle Chanel had just reopened her studio in Paris, and of course this very elegant style, this simple style, was also very popular with women at the time. At the same time, again, when we look at how long those Barbies were sold, it is kind of a classic example, but it's not fashion forward as we would call it today. Now let's move on to the 1960s, and as you may already assume for Barbie, they were not really roaring from the beginning. The design team stuck to this rather old-fashioned style of tried and tested elegance for the doll. And one clear influence was Jackie Kennedy. In the beginning of the 60s, most women admired her style. They wanted to look like her with her signature suits and the pillbox hat. When we look at the red flare Barbie, it is very clear where the inspiration came from. It is Jackie Kennedy. And we also see the coat, the A-line coat that I mentioned before. It's clearly Balenciaga, also the tiny bows that are sewn onto the coat. Balenciaga and Chanel were very often worn by Jackie Kennedy. They even gave her the hat, the pillbox hat that Jackie Kennedy loved to wear. The only thing already pointing into a more modern direction is the haircut, because Barbie gets a so-called bubble cut, and this is already a sign that things may be changing. The 60s were a decade of immense change. Young people rebelled against the parents' generation, whether we talk about the peace movement in America or the student revolts in Europe. We also have the hippies as a consequence. We have swinging London, and all of this is also reflected in fashion. We have Courrèges, who came up with clear geometric lines and cuts. The designs were later called space fashion. He is said to be one of the inventors of the miniskirt. He may hold that same title as Mary Quant. Fashion historians always have a small fight about who was first, because she is also said to have invented the miniskirt. Whoever invented it, it stands for the empowerment of women. It also stands, in the case of Mary Quant, for swinging London and for the strong influence of the Beatles, of this whole lifestyle on everyone in the 1960s. And Mattel, for the first time, took inspiration from a real person, because they released the Twiggy Barbie in the 60s. So what does Barbie do at these times where so many things were changing? She still sticks to the Hollywood glam. When we look at the Solo in the Spotlight Barbie and the Enchanted Evening Barbie, both Barbies were sold until the mid-60s, and both of them give us a different image. Solo in the Spotlight is the blonde siren in the nightclubs that is singing, and there's smoke around her. And the Enchanted Evening Barbie doll is a very elegant Barbie doll. She could be Grace Kelly, who is just on the way to pick up an award, maybe even an Oscar. Beautiful designs, at the same time not really reflecting contemporary designs anymore. But times are changing also at Mattel. In 1963, Carol Spencer joined the design team, and she was inspired by all the fashion around her, what she was wearing herself, and also she shopped in the boutiques in Los Angeles to get inspiration for the Barbie designs. So when we look into the second half of the 60s and the Barbie designs, we see clear change. Barbie was a guest at the Dean Martin show in 1968, and the team designed a pantsuit in lace for her in white, and it had a pink taffeta lining. So this was already reflecting the contemporary fashion. One even more daring example is the Lemon Kick Barbie. It is based on the 1969 outfit of Barbra Streisand when she got her Academy Award. And Streisand's outfit up until today is one of the most controversial outfits of the Academy Awards, because until today most people expect women to pick up their award in a gown. We rarely see pants on the red carpet. And when we put it into context, in 1969, that whole Streisand ensemble was even more daring. And what I like about it, Barbie picked up on this and also wore a similar, we could even call it palazzo pyjama ensemble. The 1970s started for many women with a feeling of empowerment. They wanted to be independent, and also things changed for Barbie. First of all, her side glance was changed. From now on, Barbie looks us directly in the face. And the second big change was that she got tan skin. For the 10th anniversary, Mattel came up with Sunset Malibu Barbie. And this new skin tone also allowed the design team to experiment with brighter colors. And one good example here is the live-action Barbie doll, which looks very late hippie, early 70s with a psychedelic pattern in very bright colors. Nevertheless, the 70s were also a decade of challenges overall, because there was the oil crisis, an economic crisis, and also for Mattel, the start of the 70s was not easy, because they had to shut down a branch in Japan, and also their factory in Mexico caught fire. So in addition to this, they were also faced with supply chain problems. A lot of Barbie products are made from plastic, and this is based on oil. So the design team had to be very creative in coming up with designs that used fabric that was already in inventory. What was also affected was the variety of shoes, because they couldn't afford to produce molds for every single Barbie edition. Nevertheless, the Barbie design team set themselves really high standards, because they said, we don't want the young children who play with the doll to feel the difference in Barbie before, during, and after the crisis. So by being very creative, they tried to still come up with really, really beautiful designs. Barbie has reached the 80s, and it's a very interesting decade also for Mattel. Ruth Handler and Elliot Handler, the founders of Mattel, removed themselves from the operations, and the whole business becomes a bit more structured, more corporate. the design team doesn't have the same freedoms as before anymore because the processes are split up. Nevertheless, they come up with really interesting designs for the doll. For example, there was Astro Fashion, there was also a line with Oscar de la Renta, the very first partnership of Barbie with a designer, with the difference that Oscar de la Renta didn't design an outfit himself for the doll, like the designers later on. Carol Spencer and the rest of the team, they presented options to Oscar de la Renta that were already finished, and then he could choose which ones he liked, and of course they were based on his popular designs. Barbie was also acknowledged by the fashion world when the French stylist Billy Boy used her as a miniature mannequin for his creations. And of course, Barbie again represents the major fashion trends of the decade. One example is a doll that was launched in 1980, the Golden Dream Barbie, and when we look at it, we immediately see the fashion icon Farrah Fawcett and her golden locks. Another really interesting example is also the Great Shape Barbie. And who is she? Of course, she's Jane Fonda, who released her workout video, and Barbie has this turquoise leotard with a matching pink belt, and of course she's also into the aerobics movement. And when it comes to the music industry, there was also a Barbie collection in 1986 where I have a limited edition remake of it, Barbie and the Rockers, where you also see Barbie experimented with music and also with the rocker style. What I like most about the 1980s is that Barbie started to represent more and more the working women. This already started in the 1970s because Carol Spencer designed a uniform for stewardesses, which stems from the fact that this was one of the most glamorous professions for women at the time. Shortly after, she created Barbie as a surgeon. And in 1985, Mattel released the Day to Night Barbie. She wears a pink suit ensemble with a matching hat and a calculator, which is funny looking at it today because, of course, back then she didn't have a smartphone. And by just turning the skirt inside out, it was turned into an evening outfit for an event. This is one of the outfits that was also recreated in real life during the Barbie movie press tour. Margot Robbie wore several outfits that referenced Barbie dolls, like this one, but also the Solo in the Spotlight Barbie or the Enchanted Evening Barbie. And if you want to learn more, just head over to my previous video. Another interesting thing about the 1980s is that Barbie started to represent different countries and also the local traditions and garments. Later on, this was known as the Dolls of the World collection. I find the Mexican Barbie doll really interesting because of the story behind it. Carol Spencer had a friend who was Mexican born, and she collected Mexican dance costumes. Carol Spencer saw those costumes and was inspired for this dress for the Mexican Barbie doll. She gave the dress of the doll a floral pattern, and the whole color scheme represents the Mexican flag. We have arrived in the 1990s, and in 1991 the Totally Hair Barbie was released. It's one of the most popular Barbie creations. Barbie had very interesting hair to style, and Carol Spencer wanted to give her an interesting and fun outfit for this look. So she said in her biography that she referenced Pucci and his psychedelic prints from the 60s, and she minimized the print to make it fit to Barbie, and she also gave the print the signature pink color palette. Carol Spencer was not only important for Barbie's wardrobe design, she also knew very well what would be interesting for Barbie in the future. In the 1990s, in the early 1990s, she went to conventions and realized that there was a serious collector base which was growing, and she suggested to Mattel to release special editions, collector's items, in addition to the normal Barbie dolls. So in 1992 they came out with the first designs, and one edition was the Great Eras edition. Like this one here, I have the Greek goddess, and Barbie would not be Barbie without the Hollywood influence, so soon the Hollywood legends came out, and one representation would be the Eliza Doolittle Barbie doll, which I'm holding here from My Fair Lady. And another one which I find really interesting from this Hollywood legends is Scarlett O'Hara, for the reason that we see here this green pattern. And Carol Spencer went to a museum in Los Angeles to see a recreation of the dress which was worn on screen. And she read about the costume designer that initially the print was supposed to be much smaller, but for being on screen, it's better to have a bigger print. So he enlarged the pattern. For the Barbie doll, Spencer took this pattern and made it smaller. And she says in her biography, she finds it nice that she could recreate the original design the costume designer had in mind for the Barbie doll. And from the start of this collector's edition and from the early 1990s onwards, Barbie has collaborated with many, many designers. I have a Christian Dior Barbie here. This is just one of them. There were many, many more. There was Versace, Calvin Klein, Donna Karan, you name it. And also later on, under Bill Greening as the design head, there was a famous collaboration with the Blondes, for example, which is still one of the most sought after collector's items. And Barbie also came into the real world in 2015. Moschino created an entire pret-à-porter collection dedicated to the Barbie theme. And this shows that Barbie, from her beginnings, where she was basically mirroring trends, suddenly moved into the sphere of becoming a trendsetter. And then, of course, if we think of the early 2000s, we also think of the real-life Barbie dolls, such as Paris Hilton and her friends in the bright pink outfits, which we today call Barbie core. In conclusion, we can say that Barbie has always been strongly influenced by what was going on in the real world, also by music, the arts, movies, especially Hollywood. She had hundreds of careers. She's an all-round talent with many, many interests, and probably her biggest interest is fashion. I personally find it really interesting to see fashion history reflected in this tiny doll, but also if we look at Barbie as a real person, it is also interesting how she found her style over the decades. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I also wrote a more detailed article on thepinklookbook.com, and I hope to see you soon back on this channel. Goodbye.